Chapter 3. The beginning of the propaganda period. In the spring and early summer of 1895, a protest is already loudly heard. Enough circle members. We have a sufficient number of personalities, it's time to move on to campaigning. After a year of peace, the bickering started again. To hell with the mugs. They create only mental Epicureans. Instead, they need to collect small meetings from workers from various workshops of the plant, as well as representatives from neighboring factories. At these meetings, you need to find out and discuss your situation, write down the situation here and here, collect materials it is necessary, following the example of the Poles, to distribute literature more widely, directly scattering it in the workshops. So they said alone, supported by the Social Democrats intellectuals, who subsequently laid the foundation for the St. Petersburg Union of Struggle for the Emancipation of the Working Class. Others continued to keep circles. The debate continued throughout the summer and lasted until the fall. Disputes were waged among the intelligentsia, which worked among the workers. Finally, in the autumn of 1895, the majority came to such an agreement: the circles can be maintained, but the tactics should be changed according to the urgent needs of the time. It is necessary to begin campaigning, gathering workers from neighboring factories, as well as arranging meetings of representatives of different working districts. It is necessary at these meetings to discuss the general and particular situation of the working class. It is necessary to scatter literature in as much as possible. The circles remain, but their meaning changes. From now on, their whole point is to serve as a school for the training of conscious and educated agitators. Outside this task, circles do not matter. For agitation, agitators are needed. For the development of the latter circles means the period of agitation has already begun and, moreover, it can be said, on the initiative of the workers themselves. Evidence of this could serve as the events that occurred at the Semyanica plant in December 1894. As already indicated on the previous pages, during the riots that occurred at the Semyanica plant at that time, a small brochure was laid out with the help of a hectograph by the Shelganov and Babushkin circles outlining the position of workers at this plant and distributed at the plant with some success. Now, the application of this experience on a larger scale was coming. The first favorable case for this was the unrest that began at Thornton's wool factory, where the position of the workers was directly unbearable. But before continuing my story, I will mention in a few words those organizations and groups that worked among the workers and partly competed with each other. The movement was led by the most significant social democratic group of the so-called Old People Writers or Old Social Democrats. It was called a group of writers because it was headed by V.I. Ulyanov, who was known as a writer. A.I. Potrasov, who also already acted as a writer, joined the same group. It was a group of well-trained social democrats, led by Sixy Ulyanov, Lenin, and A.I. Potrasov, Useterbaum, Martov, V.V. Starkov, G.M. Kurtzanovsky, A.A. Vanev, M.A. Sylvan, G.B. Krosin, S.I. Radchenko, Zaporozhets, etc. A lot of studying youth, both male and female, joined them. Of the women, one cannot fail to name N.K. Krupskaya, A.A. Yakubova, 3. P. Nevzorov. Closely connected with this group were the workers close to me behind the Nevskaya Zastava, V.A. Shelganov, I.V. Babushkin, and Merkulov, and other group workers, some of whom were just listed for classes. This group was the main supporter of the new tactics, insisting on the transition from social democratic propaganda among a close circle of workers to agitation in a wide working environment. They were joined by a lot of studying youth, both male and female. Of the women, one cannot fail to name N.K. Krupskaya, A.A. Yakubova, 3. P. Nevzorov. Closely connected with this group were the workers close to me behind the Nevskaya Zastava, V. A. Shelganov, I.V. Babushkin, and Merkulov, and other group workers, some of whom were just listed for classes. This group was the main supporter of the new tactics, insisting on the transition from social democratic propaganda among a close circle of workers to agitation in a wide working environment. They were joined by a lot of studying youth, both male and female. Of the women, one cannot fail to name N.K. Krupskaya, A.A. Yakubova, 3. P. Nevzorov. Closely connected with this group were the workers close to me behind the Nevskaya Zastava, V.A. Shelganov, I.V. Babushkin, and Merkulov, and other group workers, some of whom were just listed for classes. This group was the main supporter of the new tactics, insisting on the transition from social democratic propaganda among a closed circle of workers to agitation in a wide working environment. For classes with which some of the persons just listed went. This group was the main supporter of the new tactics, insisting on the transition from social democratic propaganda among a closed circle of workers to agitation in a wide working environment. For classes with which some of the persons just listed went. This group was the main supporter of the new tactics, insisting on the transition from social democratic propaganda among a closed circle of workers to agitation in a wide working environment. Along with this group of old social democrats, there was a group of technology students, or so-called young grouped around technology student IV Chernyshev and dentist Mikhailov, who soon betrayed his comrades. Bogodarev, Malashevsky, and others joined this group. There were also small groups of intellectuals who had connections with the circle workers. The printing group of the volunteers continued to exist, which had in its midst a very active worker. But her activities focused mainly on the publishing of underground literature. The workers, who were part of the workers' circles organized by V.A. Shelganov, I.V. Babushkin and their comrades, made up the Netskaya Sastava Active Social Democratic Workers Organization, which to a certain extent was an independent whole. In addition to the Social Democratic group of workers of the Neva outpost, at that time there was still a special group of independent workers, Wild. This was not their accepted name, although some of them called themselves that. But the name corresponds to the essence of the matter. Therefore I attach it to distinguish them from everyone else. The independents organized their own circles, which were engaged in self-development. They did not allow the intelligentsia to approach, as they say, a cannon shot. They shot even relations with her, and sometimes even relations with other group workers who had connections with the intelligentsia. However, with Shelganov and some others there were some relations based more on personal ties. At the head of this direction of the Wild stood a rather characteristic and peculiar personality of a worker, very developed, but cautious to the extreme. I return to my story about the Thornton case. The position of the Thornton workers at this time was truly enslaving. The oppression was all the more so since the factory was completely isolated on the right bank of the Neva, just against the numerous factories and plants of the crowded region located on the left bank. Workers were obliged to live at the factory in a badly arranged building. Both individual lockers and general barracks, for men, for women, and paired, were jam-packed, the air left much to be desired. The factory shop, therefore, with all the charms. The working day at the time was very long. A special skillful system of fines prevailed. Workers could leave the factory, even on holidays, no later than 11 o'clock in the evening. On open air, in the described time of pressure and swindle of the factory administration, all sorts of limits were crossed. Thanks to a hitch in sales, they found fault with the most trifling occasions in order to count workers. Prices for goods decreased in the most arrogant way. For example, a beaver was woven of fabric of a certain quality and length, say 56 arsh. Payments from a piece were given 4p 32k. After a while, the factory administration announced that the fashion had passed on beaver. It is required, they say, Ural, and the price for each piece will be 4p 14k. The workers agreed to work. What turned out to be? The new fabric was essentially the same beaver, only the length of the piece increased by 4 to 6. As a result, the interest for the owners was truly amazing. It was all the easier for Messrs. Thorntons to practice such swindles because the workers were very undeveloped and clogged, but little by little, the developed and organized workers, due to the Neva outpost, began to engage with Thornton. Some of the first directly came to the barracks to Thornton and specially talked with some of the workers there. Thanks to polls, I managed to make an acquaintance and get a lot of valuable information. Thornton's factory was at a time of great ferment among workers, and a strike was possible. On this occasion, as well as to clarify the general state of affairs in various regions, it was decided to arrange a general meeting of representatives of social democratic groups operating in various regions. It was also necessary for determining a general plan of action among the working masses. This meeting, it was decided to arrange for the Neva outpost, as I recall, in the very early days of November. It was quite numerous. As representatives from the Neva outpost, it was V.A. Shelganov, I.V. Babushkin, it seems Nurkilov, and I. From the Narva region there were a worker Zinoviev, who worked at the Putilov factory, and Karamyshev, a worker at the same factory. There seemed to be representatives from other areas. There were 2 weavers from the Thornton factory. There were representatives from the group of old Social Democrats, including Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, whom I met for the first time at this meeting. I don't remember whether there were representatives from the group of young or the group of technologists at this meeting. I eschewed the intelligentsia and tried to maintain my relations with the workers. Among them I knew many, and of those who worked among the working intelligentsia, almost nobody. Vladimir Ilyich immediately attracted my attention, both with his appearance and with his skillful ability to conduct business. Looking at him, I immediately guessed that it was exactly that ball that Babushkin had long been talking to me about. The meeting began with a clarification of the situation in various regions and in individual factories. 2 weavers who were present at this meeting were interviewed from the Thornton factory, which at that moment attracted special attention of the audience, because a strike was foreseen at it. The poll of the Thornton weavers was led by Vladimir Ilyich, who soon turned out to be the main leader of the meeting. Itel no led skillfully, put questions very skillfully in obtaining the necessary information to him, which he immediately wrote down with a pencil on a piece of paper lying on the table in front of him. Obviously, he was collecting material that was to serve as an appeal to the workers of the Thornton factory,